Hi, friends. Well, I'm starting a church. What? I know. I'm starting a church. So, I think I started a church a long time ago, actually. It's just hit me. Maybe I'm a slow learner. When I look at the Grace is Messy blog, the Ask Steve Austin podcast, Catching Your Breath, the books I've written, the Facebook groups I've started, all of this has been in preparation to launch a church. It's a community of misfits. That's the best kind of church. And I don't think I'll ever be hired at another brick and mortar church ever again in my life. But I am so passionate about connecting people who are passionate about love and empathy and grace and God, whatever that means to you. And I long for deep, honest, courageous, vulnerable conversations where we can just show up with a cup of coffee or a glass of beer and be ourselves and invite God into that ordinary, sacred space. So I'm starting a church. So right now it's me and one more. Oh, my friend Alexis is in the Facebook group, and I just finished teaching or preaching this Bible study for the rest of us. Preached my heart out for Alexis, so I hope she loves it. I'm going to show you that video here in just a minute, and I want to invite you to be a part of it. So the Facebook group is called Spiritual Misfits. The Bible studies we're going to do twice a month called A Bible Study for the Rest of Us. I want your feedback, your questions. What do you want to talk about? We're going to do these studies twice a month, and we're going to talk in this group all the time about whatever, anything and everything, no holds barred, as long as it is kind and compassionate and supporting of the group as a whole. Then we're going to come together and support each other in this thing called life that is not always easy. So if you are desperate for grace, which my friend Suzanne DeWitt Hall calls the energy that love radiates. Grace is the energy that love radiates. If you're desperate for that, for grace, to get down in the cracks and crevices and cover all the warts and to find God right in the midst of the mess, this is for you. I hope you'll join us. You can sign up at patreon.com/I am Steve Austin. Wherever you're watching this, on a secret YouTube link or Facebook or via email, wherever you're watching this, you'll see the link for patreon.com/I am Steve Austin. $15 a month. It's just a way for you to commit to say, yeah, I want to be here. This matters to me. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be a part of this because I'm putting my money, I'm investing my money into it, which means I'm going to invest my time and my heart, and I'm going to be there because I don't want to do this alone. I'm tired of journeying alone, and I want you to journey with me if this at all sounds like something you'd like to be a part of. So whether you're a Christian, an atheist, an agnostic, a Buddhist, whatever you are, you're welcome here. I see the world through the lens of Christianity because that's the lens I was given. But you will be welcome and safe and celebrated and embraced here, whoever you are. So check it out. Here's the very first Bible study for the rest of us. I'm so glad you're here. I am just enamored with the story of Elijah. And we see Elijah a lot in 1 Kings. I am looking today at 1 Kings 17, 18, and 19. And when you look at this story, you see that they've been in a drought for 3.5 years. They've been in a drought, no rain. And normally when I would read that story, that is a detail I would skip over. But no rain for 3.5 years, it's a pretty big deal, don't you think? So I wonder what the longest time is that you've been without rain. What's the longest that your community has been without water? What's the longest your house has been without water? You ever had the water turned off, maybe because you forgot to pay the bill, or times were really lean, or there was a main that burst in town and it caused your water to be cut off for a few hours? That's miserable. But what about 3 years? 3.5 years of no rain. So everything in the environment is connected. Just like everything in our bodies is connected, everything in our communities is connected. And so think about the necessity of water. We need water to live. Animals and plants need water to survive. We need water to grow the food we eat. We use water to wash dishes, to cook, to bathe, to swim, to go whitewater rafting. We use water for transportation. Boats and cruises and barges move all sorts of things up and down the waterways. But can you imagine what your community would look like if there'd been no rain for 3.5 years? What would the lakes in your community look like? What about the rivers? What would it look like? 3.5 years of no water. So there are communities, lots and lots of communities, that use the power of water, the energy of water, to make electricity. That sounds scary, if you ask me, but I need my lights on. I'm using a light right here to illuminate my face for this video. I'm using electricity for this camera so that you can see me. I'm using electricity to power this microphone, which is powered by this computer and this soundboard, and all this takes water to make the electricity to make it run. My kids want to play the Nintendo, heaven forbid. So without water, there's this enormous domino effect that starts happening all around us. So don't skip over this. Think about how the drought impacts the farmer. Without rain, the corn crop dries up. Without the income from the corn, the farmer can't buy that new tractor that he needs. And if the dealership can't sell several new tractors because the farms are all dried up, then the dealership goes out of business. If the dealership goes out of business, other people lose their jobs. And all of this because it hasn't rained. So, all right, here we are in 1 Kings 17, and God tells Elijah, get up and go to the brook named Kerith. And the brook named Kerith is near the Jordan River. And God tells Elijah, you go there, you can drink that clean water, and the ravens will feed you. Now, wait, I got to tell you. So I've known the story about Elijah and the broom tree where the ravens come and bring him food. I've known that story, I think, all my life. I can't ever remember not knowing that story. But I didn't know that really 1 Kings 17 is the first time that God says, go there and rest, and the ravens will feed you. And so this just impresses on me just how human Elijah is, full of doubt. So we don't hear anything about Elijah's parents. We don't hear anything about where he came from. You read through the Old Testament, and it's almost like Elijah is just dropped out of the clouds, dropped out of the sky, and here he is, this man of God. And I think because of that, a lot of people want to envision Elijah as more than human, like Melchizedek, right? As some superhuman, super Christian. But it's not true. If you follow the journey of Elijah, you see a very flawed, very weak person who is full of doubt, who loves God. Yeah, let's say that again because this is important. He's a flawed, weak person who is full of doubt, and he loves God. So I think that's hope. That's hope for the rest of us. There's this idea that you can be a human full of all kinds of warts and love God. Not, you're a human full of all sorts of issues and problems and weaknesses and temptations and addictions and you name it. And once you get cleaned up, start going to church, do some recovery, work on some counseling and therapy, and find a spiritual director and start going to Sunday school and read your Bible through for a year, then maybe God will love you. Bullshit. Here we see, and throughout Scripture, we see human beings. My God, look at the story of David, right? Look at the Psalms. Look at the Psalms not as these beautiful fairy tale prayers from a man after God's own heart. No, the Psalms are a train wreck of human emotion, up and down, and praise be to God, and woe is me, and oh my gosh, read the Psalms from the perspective of a train wreck of human emotion, the full spectrum of human emotion, and you'll have more permission to love God as you are, to receive the love of God as you are. And Elijah is a perfect example. So also, look at the compassion of God here. No rain for 3.5 years. And we often talk about how the very hairs on your head are numbered by God. That if God cares about the sparrow, how much more he must care about you and me. But in this story, we see God using the ravens or the sparrows, the birds, to feed Elijah, his beloved. So you see the compassion of God in action. I'm going to send the birds to feed you. I'm going to send the water down that brook to give you something to drink. That's grace. It's compassion. It's grace. My friend Suzanne DeWitt Hall defines grace as the energy love radiates. My friend Ed Bacon would call that a glory attack. Grace is the energy love radiates. Oh my goodness. So good. All right. So let's get back to the story. There's been no rain. Have you gotten this yet? There's been no rain for 3.5 years. So I wonder if you've ever been there, wondering if God has abandoned you, almost convinced that God has abandoned you for this long, extended period of time. Maybe it's 2 weeks for you, but it feels like 3.5 years. Maybe it's 3.5 years for you. Maybe it's a decade, and you think, the heavens have dried up. The heavens have dried up. And God has surely forgotten me, doesn't give a damn about me. I tithe, I go to church, I'm involved, I volunteer, I'm a good parent, I'm a good spouse, I'm a good person, and I am suffering in silence, and the heavens have dried up. Well, I got good news for you. God's about to make it rain. Okay? So, I want to talk for a minute about this crazy, evil woman named Jezebel. She's the worst. She's the worst. The people and the prophets of God even feared this woman named Jezebel. So she'd already tried to round up all the prophets of God and slaughter them. This chick is bad news. Don't forget Jezebel, okay? She's just shown up. She's going to show up again. Now, I want to fast forward just a few verses in chapter 18 of 1 Kings, and Elijah hears, just like I hear right now, the sound of rain for the first time in 3.5 years. It's raining here in Alabama while I record this. I think that's kind of fitting. It's raining for the first time in 3.5 years. Look at the hope. Look at the excitement. We're not going to die. It's raining. Oh my God, it's raining. Do you know my story? So I was a pastor for about 10 years. I wasn't dropped out of the sky like Elijah. I was no prophet. I didn't tell the rain when to start and stop. But I'd been a church boy all my life. My family, they were church people. And in the midst of my faithfulness, in the midst of my genuine desire to be more like Jesus every day, I was also dealing with the fallout of childhood sexual abuse. I was addicted to pornography at the age of 12, and that lasted 20 years. I was fighting inner demons of anxiety and depression and PTSD, and I was eaten alive with fear and shame and guilt. Now, you remember that bad bitch, Jezebel? Just after it starts raining, she threatens Elijah's life. She says, "You'll be dead in 24 hours." And she means it. Now, here's this prophet who is painfully human. Obadiah has fallen on his face in reverence to Elijah. They've called him Master Elijah. God has just proven himself by making it rain for the first time in, 1,300 days. And this same man, the very next day after it starts raining, flees for his life in fear of Jezebel, this troublemaker, this murderous, evil, horrible woman. Elijah flees for his life. Now, you can read this and think, well, he's pretty chicken shit. What a coward. If you just read this from the surface. But when I put myself in Elijah's shoes, when I see myself in this story, it changes everything. I wonder if you can see yourself there. So for me, I'd been serving God since I was a boy, 2 years of ministry school, 10 years of paid church work, and I tried to die by suicide. Now, if you hear my story and you know nothing of mental illness and you have no compassion and you have no empathy, you can say, wow, that guy sounds like chicken shit. What a coward to run away, to abandon his family, right? People said that. Now let's look at Elijah for a minute. Elijah's exhausted. He's been running for miles, and he collapses by this solitary broom tree, a juniper tree. And he prays to God and says, just let me die. He says, God, if there be any other way, please let this cup pass from me. Oh, wait, that was Jesus. Same prayer. God, if there is any other way, they are coming to kill me, right? We see this precursor to Jesus. They're coming to kill me. I know they're coming. God, just let me die. Just take my life. Just let me disappear. It would be better if I died. He's scared to death of what Jezebel might do. And that fear is a big damn deal. My friend Ed Bacon talks often about how you can't have one foot in the house of fear and another foot in the house of love. Fear brings even the gods, even these mighty men of valor like Elijah, fear brings them down to size. Well, I've been there, holding the Bible in my lap, writing suicide notes at the same time, and praying to die. I get it. Elijah would have rather died by God's hand than have been captured by the enemy. Rather than be taken a prisoner of war, he would have rather God just smote him. I remember the slander. I remember the accusations. I remember how scared I was that my name was going to be ruined, that my family was going to be humiliated. And here's Elijah's confession to God. I'm no better than my fathers. Am I no better than my fathers? Sometimes we work so hard to become unlike others that we become the very thing that we hate. So instead, maybe we stop trying to become less like someone else and become more like love, more like grace, the energy that love radiates. Let God hold up this mirror of mercy and grace and love. Let God hold that up and show us what God sees and become more like that. So here's Elijah, tired, anxious, completely overwhelmed. He falls asleep, and then he's awakened later by an angel who supplies him with enough food for 40 days and 40 nights. Now we see that over and over again, that 40 days and 40 nights. 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. 40 days and 40 nights it rained, and they lived on the ark, right? 40 is the number of divine ordination, and it's given to earthly things. So in other words, God is a very present help to Elijah in time of need. So maybe a person shows up, and that's God being a very present help in time of need. Maybe it's a spouse, a friend, a therapist, a pastor, a counselor, who knows, a stranger on the street. Or maybe God is so desperate to get to you that God sends a bird, an angel, wafers laid out so that you'll have breakfast, so that you won't starve to death. So they journey together, Elijah and God, through the wilderness, 180 miles, until Elijah arrives at Mount Horeb. He acts as the royal runner, it says, from Mount Carmel for 18 miles. The royal runner, he's running out in front of the caravan. At Mount Horeb, this is the famous story where Elijah crawls into the cave and he goes back to sleep. He's at Mount Horeb, which is the mountain of God. I have chills just thinking about the mountain called God. When we follow God, I don't know where this came from. I do know where this came from. Okay. When we follow God, when we continue to be faithful, when we continue to trust, even when we feel like we've got blinders on, God turns our mountains into molehills. All of these impossibilities, all of the ways that shame says it will always be this way, it will never get better, you will always be a loser, no one will believe you. God says, these mountains, with just the faith of a mustard seed, I will tear them down into molehills so that you can see me. And in seeing me, you will see who you truly are. The mountain of Elohim, God the Creator. So Elohim is God the Son, the living Word, right? The living Word in divine form to create, and later with human form to redeem. So this is how God appears in divine form to the patriarchs like Elijah. So you could say that Elijah met Jesus in that cave in his darkest, most desperate, most exhausted, most unthinkable time. And Jesus created something new where just 40 days ago, Elijah's ready to die. Am I no better than my father's God? Just let me die. And there I am in an ICU room, numb from the waist down. The doctors are monitoring me constantly. The nurses are in there constantly because they don't know if my liver is going to make it, because I've said, God, let me die. And if you won't do it, then watch me. I'm out of here, Jack. I can't handle this pain. I can't handle this shame, the fear, the guilt, the humiliation. I can't handle the fallout of my own mistakes. Just let me die. And God shows up in the cave. Jesus shows up. Not in the hurricane, not in the earthquake, not in the fire. He shows up in stillness. He shows up in a gentle whisper. And it's in the gentle whisper, in that where we find God, in the breath, in the sound of silence, the sound of stillness. God shows up and says, I'm not finished with you yet. Those are the words Jesus spoke to me in an ICU room with this warm hand I could never explain on my chest and this inaudible voice, this knowing in my depths that God was saying, I'm not finished with you yet. Your story isn't over. I decide when it's going to rain. I decide when it's going to dry up. I decide when it's going to rain again. I am God. You are not. And I love you too much to let your story end here. So please, would you just hold on? Please, would you just trust me? This story is not over. Yahweh. YHVH, because they didn't use vowels. So it's not, we say in English, Yahweh, but really it was YHVH, Yod Hey, Vod Hey. It was when God shows up in the burning bush, he says, who should I tell them sent me? He says, tell them I am sent you. Yahweh, I am breath. I am life. I am the creator. I am the redeemer. I am God. Tell them I am sent you. And when God shows up in a breath, outside the noise of man-made religion and all these constructs and constraints that we put on people, all these yokes that are heavy, that are not easy, that make us want to die, when God shows up and says, I am, and I am, it changes everything. When God shows up in the rain, the sound of the rain, and washes everything clean and gives everything life, it's a promise that it won't always be this way. It won't always be this way. One day, my friend Sue and I are going to write a book called Subject to Change. Subject to Change. It's the story of my life. It's the story of your life. Subject to change. It won't always be this way. I'm not finished with you yet. Just keep holding on. If I have to do something so crazy that I send birds to feed you, I will, because I value you, because you are mine, because I knit you together in your mother's womb, and nothing, not height nor depth, nothing in heaven or on earth, not principalities or powers, nothing can separate you, not mental illness, depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenia. Nothing can separate you from the love of God, because I am the God who makes your mountains into molehills. I am the God who shows up in the moment of your desperation and says, your story isn't over. Let's walk together. Let's journey together. We'll continue this next week. I meant to teach, I didn't mean to preach, but it just sort of happened. We'll continue this in 2 weeks. So we'll do one of these every 2 weeks. And I don't know, we'll talk about faith and mental illness until I get tired of it. So I want to pray. If you're not a prayer, that's okay. You can end this here, but I'm going to pray. So if you'd like to join me, do that. I am breath. I am life. I have come that you may have life and have it more abundant. I won't put anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Watch me, work with me, see how I do things. Learn from me the unforced rhythms of grace. That's what he says in Matthew 11:28-30. God, I thank you. God, I thank you. Thank you that you're not finished with us. When we are done with ourselves, when we are at the very end of our rope, holding on by just a thread, you come in with hope, with grace, the energy that love radiates, and you remind us that we are your beloved. Thank you. So make me new, come and renew. Take this heart of stone in me, set my mind and spirit free. Make me new, come and renew. I am an empty vessel, Lord, for the potter to restore. Make me new, 'cause I can't rely on yesterday's manna. I can't depend on past victories. I must have Jesus. I must have Jesus. He's all I need. So make me new. Come and renew. Take this heart of stone in me. Set my mind and spirit free. Make me new. Make me like you. I am a willing vessel, Lord, for the potter to restore. Make me new. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Make her face to shine on you, be gracious to you, and give you peace. The peace of God, like a sentry guard marching back and forth, protecting your mind, protecting your thoughts, keeping you at perfect peace as your mind stays on God. May you be at peace. May you just be today. Amen.